I lost opportunities I'd earned and later found out who had been speaking against me. The words echoed in my mind like a cruel mantra as I stared at the email on my laptop screen, the glow casting harsh shadows across the cluttered kitchen table where my half-finished coffee sat cooling beside Alex's forgotten math homework. The kind of ordinary Tuesday evening that shattered without warning when I decided to check my work inbox one last time before bed, only to find a forwarded chain from my colleague Sarah, the one I'd confided in about the promotion I was gunning for, the senior editor position at the publishing house where I'd poured 12 years of late nights and skipped family dinners into building my reputation. And there it was, buried in the thread, a message from Mark's account, my husband's account, the man I'd married 15 years ago in a simple backyard ceremony with rain threatening the whole time, sent to my boss, casually dropping lines about how I'd been struggling with stability lately, implying episodes of unreliability that mirrored the anxiety I'd battled privately after Mom's death 5 years back, but twisted into something damning, like I was unfit for more responsibility. And my heart plummeted, a sickening drop as if the floor had vanished. Because why would he do this? Why sabotage the very dreams I'd shared with him over lukewarm takeout pizza on our worn couch? The opportunities I'd earned through endless revisions and networking events while he handled Alex's soccer practices and school runs. Or so I thought. But now fragments clicked into place. The missed interview last spring when the recruiter suddenly ghosted me after I'd mentioned Mark's connection in the industry. He worked in marketing for a rival firm, nothing glamorous but with overlaps in our circles, and the fellowship I'd applied for in the fall, the one that could have taken us to New York for a fresh start, rejected with vague feedback about personal concerns, and I'd blamed myself, internalized it as not being good enough, crying in the shower so Alex wouldn't hear, but here was the proof, time-stamped months ago, his words laced with feigned concern. I hate to say it, but she's been erratic. And rage boiled up from somewhere deep, mixing with betrayal so sharp it stole my breath, making me clutch the edge of the table until my knuckles whitened, the rain pattering against the window like indifferent applause. And I heard him upstairs, humming as he folded laundry, the domestic rhythm we'd built together, now feeling like a facade. So I stood, legs unsteady, and climbed the stairs, each step amplifying the thud of my pulse, pushing open the bedroom door where he sat on the bed sorting socks, his phone charging on the nightstand with its familiar cracked screen, and he looked up with that easy smile. "Hey babe, you coming to bed?" But I thrust the laptop at him, screen open to the email, my voice cracking as I demanded, "What the hell is this, Mark? You've been talking behind my back? To my boss?" And his face drained of color, the smile faltering into something defensive, guilty. "Wait, how did you? It's not what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like, his stammering excuses tumbling out. "I was worried about you taking on too much with your history. I thought I was protecting you." Protecting me by clipping my wings, by whispering doubts into the ears of those who held my future. And the pain hit like a wave, not just the lost chances, the promotion that went to someone junior, the speaking gig at the conference I'd prepped for weeks only to be uninvited, but the erosion of trust, realizing the man who'd held my hand through therapy sessions after my panic attacks had weaponized my vulnerabilities, turned them into ammunition against my ambitions. And I backed away, tears blurring his form. "How could you? I trusted you with everything." My words raw, splintered, and he reached out. "Please, let's talk about this." But I shook my head, grabbing my pillow and retreating to the guest room, the door clicking shut with a finality that echoed my shattering world. Lying there in the dark on the stiff mattress we'd bought for visiting in-laws, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy spin, my mind replaying every supportive comment he'd made about my career, now tainted with suspicion, wondering if his encouragement had always been laced with sabotage, if his insecurities about his own stalled job had festered into this quiet war against my success. And grief welled up for the partnership I'd believed in, the family unit with Alex's drawings taped to the fridge downstairs, the weekend plans for apple picking we'd discussed over breakfast, all fracturing in this moment of revelation. My phone buzzing with a text from him. "I'm sorry, I love you." But I silenced it, curling into myself, the rain intensifying outside as if mourning with me. And sleep evaded me that night, replaced by a hollow ache, the first fissures in what I'd thought was solid ground, leaving me adrift in the wreckage of his betrayal, questioning not just the opportunities stolen, but the very foundation of our life together, the quiet suburban existence with its school newsletters and Netflix queues, now exposed as fragile. And in the pre-dawn hours, as Alex's alarm would soon chime for school, I wondered how to shield him from this storm, how to face the day with this wound gaping open, raw and unhealed. By the time Alex came home from school that afternoon, the house had settled into an uneasy hush, the kind that follows a storm when the wind dies but the air still feels charged. And I'd spent the hours since dropping him off cleaning obsessively, scrubbing the kitchen counters until my knuckles stung, sorting the pantry by expiration date, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from circling back to Mark's confession over cold coffee that morning. The way his voice had cracked on, I was scared you'd leave me behind, as though my ambition were the real infidelity. I heard the front door open, the familiar thud of his backpack hitting the floor, then his sneakers squeaking on the tile as he called out, "Mom, I'm starving," and I forced my face into something neutral before turning the corner from the laundry room, where I'd been folding towels I didn't need folded. He stood at the fridge already, pulling out the leftover stir-fry from Sunday, and when he looked up, his eyes flicked over me, quick, assessing, the way kids learn to scan for danger without admitting they're doing it. "You okay?" he asked, casual but not quite, spooning cold rice onto a plate. I nodded too fast. "Yeah, just tired. Long day." He microwaved the dish, the hum filling the silence between us, and I watched the numbers count down, 30 seconds feeling like 30 minutes, until the beep released us. He carried the plate to the table, sat, and started eating without looking at me again, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he chewed slower than usual. I poured myself water I didn't want, mostly to have something to do with my hands, and sat across from him. "How was school?" I asked, the question automatic, safe. "Fine. Got an A on the history quiz. Mr. Patel said my essay was insightful." He said it flatly, no pride, like he was reciting facts to keep the conversation moving forward. I murmured, "That's great, honey," but the words felt thin, inadequate against the weight pressing down on both of us. After a few bites, he set the spoon down. Dad texted me at lunch, said he might be home late tonight. His eyes met mine then, searching, and I realized he already knew something was wrong. Not the details, maybe, but the shape of it, the way parents' voices change when they're lying about being fine. My throat tightened. "We're working through some stuff," I said carefully. "Adult stuff. It's not about you." He nodded, but his mouth twisted. "I'm not a baby, Mom. I can tell when you guys are fighting, even if you don't yell." The honesty landed like a slap. Not angry, just true, and I felt tears prick behind my eyes again, the same tears I'd swallowed all day. "We're not fighting exactly," I lied, then corrected myself because he deserved better. "We had a disagreement, a big one, about something Dad did that hurt me. We're trying to figure out how to fix it." He pushed rice around his plate. "Is it divorce?" The word came out small, almost whispered, and my heart cracked open wider. "No," I said quickly, reaching across to cover his hand with mine. His fingers were still boy-soft, warm from holding the spoon. "No, we're not there, I promise. We're just hurting right now, both of us." He looked at our joint hands for a long moment, then pulled his away gently, not rejecting, just needing space, and stood to rinse his plate. "I have soccer practice in an hour. Can you drive me?" "Of course." I watched him load the dishwasher, the careful way he stacked bowls so they wouldn't chip, a habit he picked up from Mark years ago, and the sight of it, the small echo of his father and his movements, made fresh grief rise in my chest, not just for what Mark had done, but for what this might cost Alex if we couldn't find our way back. When Mark walked in 40 minutes later, tie loosened, briefcase in one hand, the air shifted again. Alex froze mid-lace of his cleats, eyes darting between us. Mark set the briefcase down slowly. "Hey, bud," he said, voice rough from lack of sleep or crying or both. Alex gave a tight nod, finished tying, then grabbed his water bottle and headed for the door without a word. I followed, keys in hand, but paused in the hallway long enough to look back at Mark standing alone in the foyer, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "We'll talk later," I said, not kindly, not cruelly, just fact. He nodded, swallowed. "I canceled my meetings tomorrow. I'll pick him up from practice, take him for ice cream or something, give you the house." It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but an acknowledgement that space was necessary, that he understood the boundary I'd set that morning. I didn't respond, just turned and left with Alex, the car ride to the field quiet except for the low thrum of the engine and the occasional swipe of wipers against lingering drizzle. At the drop-off, Alex hesitated before getting out. "Don't make him sleep on the couch forever," he said suddenly, eyes on the dashboard. "He hates that, his back hurts." I blinked, startled by the specificity, by how much he noticed even when we thought we were shielding him. "I'll think about it," I managed, and he gave me a small, worried smile before jogging toward the field, where the other boys were already warming up, their shouts carrying across the wet grass. Driving home alone, I let the tears come freely, not sobbing, just steady leaking that blurred the taillights ahead, and when I pulled into the driveway, Mark's car was still there. He hadn't left after all. Inside, he was at the kitchen table, laptop open but screen dark, hands folded like he was praying over nothing. He looked up when I entered. "I told my boss I need a few days," he said quietly. "I'm going to call the therapist we used before, see if she can fit us in separately first. I don't expect you to forgive me tonight or tomorrow. I need you to know I'm not running from this." I stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around myself, feeling the exhaustion settle deeper into every joint. "I don't know what I need yet," I admitted, "but I know I can't pretend everything's normal for Alex's sake. He already feels it. He asked if we're getting divorced." Mark's face crumbled for a second before he caught himself. "God, I'm so sorry." I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. Instead, I walked past him to the stairs, paused halfway up. "You can have the bedroom tonight. I'll take the guest room again. But tomorrow we start setting some rules. No more secrets, no more protecting me by lying, and you don't get to decide what I can handle." He nodded, eyes shining. Downstairs, the house ticked softly around us, the dishwasher humming its completion cycle, and I climbed the rest of the way feeling the first faint outline of a path, not toward reconciliation yet, but toward clarity, toward protecting the one person who hadn't asked for any of this, while the two adults who had created the mess tried haltingly to stop making it worse. By the time Alex came home from school that afternoon, the house had settled into an uneasy hush, the kind that follows a storm when the wind dies but the air still feels charged. And I'd spent the hours since dropping him off cleaning obsessively, scrubbing the kitchen counters until my knuckles stung, sorting the pantry by expiration date, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from circling back to Mark's confession over cold coffee that morning. The way his voice had cracked on, I was scared you'd leave me behind, as though my ambition were the real infidelity. I heard the front door open, the familiar thud of his backpack hitting the floor, then his sneakers squeaking on the tile as he called out, "Mom, I'm starving," and I forced my face into something neutral before turning the corner from the laundry room, where I'd been folding towels I didn't need folded. He stood at the fridge already, pulling out the leftover stir-fry from Sunday, and when he looked up, his eyes flicked over me, quick, assessing, the way kids learn to scan for danger without admitting they're doing it. "You okay?" he asked, casual but not quite, spooning cold rice onto a plate. I nodded too fast. "Yeah, just tired. Long day." He microwaved the dish, the hum filling the silence between us, and I watched the numbers count down, 30 seconds feeling like 30 minutes, until the beep released us. He carried the plate to the table, sat, and started eating without looking at me again, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he chewed slower than usual. I poured myself water I didn't want, mostly to have something to do with my hands, and sat across from him. "How was school?" I asked, the question automatic, safe. "Fine. Got an A on the history quiz. Mr. Patel said my essay was insightful." He said it flatly, no pride, like he was reciting facts to keep the conversation moving forward. I murmured, "That's great, honey," but the words felt thin, inadequate against the weight pressing down on both of us. After a few bites, he set the spoon down. Dad texted me at lunch, said he might be home late tonight. His eyes met mine then, searching, and I realized he already knew something was wrong. Not the details, maybe, but the shape of it, the way parents' voices change when they're lying about being fine. My throat tightened. "We're working through some stuff," I said carefully. "Adult stuff. It's not about you." He nodded, but his mouth twisted. "I'm not a baby, Mom. I can tell when you guys are fighting, even if you don't yell." The honesty landed like a slap. Not angry, just true, and I felt tears prick behind my eyes again, the same tears I'd swallowed all day. "We're not fighting exactly," I lied, then corrected myself because he deserved better. "We had a disagreement, a big one, about something Dad did that hurt me. We're trying to figure out how to fix it." He pushed rice around his plate. "Is it divorce?" The word came out small, almost whispered, and my heart cracked open wider. "No," I said quickly, reaching across to cover his hand with mine. His fingers were still boy-soft, warm from holding the spoon. "No, we're not there, I promise. We're just hurting right now, both of us." He looked at our joint hands for a long moment, then pulled his away gently, not rejecting, just needing space, and stood to rinse his plate. "I have soccer practice in an hour. Can you drive me?" "Of course." I watched him load the dishwasher, the careful way he stacked bowls so they wouldn't chip, a habit he picked up from Mark years ago, and the sight of it, the small echo of his father and his movements, made fresh grief rise in my chest, not just for what Mark had done, but for what this might cost Alex if we couldn't find our way back. When Mark walked in 40 minutes later, tie loosened, briefcase in one hand, the air shifted again. Alex froze mid-lace of his cleats, eyes darting between us. Mark set the briefcase down slowly. "Hey, bud," he said, voice rough from lack of sleep or crying or both. Alex gave a tight nod, finished tying, then grabbed his water bottle and headed for the door without a word. I followed, keys in hand, but paused in the hallway long enough to look back at Mark standing alone in the foyer, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "We'll talk later," I said, not kindly, not cruelly, just fact. He nodded, swallowed. "I canceled my meetings tomorrow. I'll pick him up from practice, take him for ice cream or something, give you the house." It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but an acknowledgement that space was necessary, that he understood the boundary I'd set that morning. I didn't respond, just turned and left with Alex, the car ride to the field quiet except for the low thrum of the engine and the occasional swipe of wipers against lingering drizzle. At the drop-off, Alex hesitated before getting out. "Don't make him sleep on the couch forever," he said suddenly, eyes on the dashboard. "He hates that, his back hurts." I blinked, startled by the specificity, by how much he noticed even when we thought we were shielding him. "I'll think about it," I managed, and he gave me a small, worried smile before jogging toward the field, where the other boys were already warming up, their shouts carrying across the wet grass. Driving home alone, I let the tears come freely, not sobbing, just steady leaking that blurred the taillights ahead, and when I pulled into the driveway, Mark's car was still there. He hadn't left after all. Inside, he was at the kitchen table, laptop open but screen dark, hands folded like he was praying over nothing. He looked up when I entered. "I told my boss I need a few days," he said quietly. "I'm going to call the therapist we used before, see if she can fit us in separately first. I don't expect you to forgive me tonight or tomorrow. I need you to know I'm not running from this." I stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around myself, feeling the exhaustion settle deeper into every joint. "I don't know what I need yet," I admitted, "but I know I can't pretend everything's normal for Alex's sake. He already feels it. He asked if we're getting divorced." Mark's face crumbled for a second before he caught himself. "God, I'm so sorry." I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. Instead, I walked past him to the stairs, paused halfway up. "You can have the bedroom tonight. I'll take the guest room again. But tomorrow we start setting some rules. No more secrets, no more protecting me by lying, and you don't get to decide what I can handle." He nodded, eyes shining. Downstairs, the house ticked softly around us, the dishwasher humming its completion cycle, and I climbed the rest of the way feeling the first faint outline of a path, not toward reconciliation yet, but toward clarity, toward protecting the one person who hadn't asked for any of this, while the two adults who had created the mess tried haltingly to stop making it worse. Friday morning arrived with a brittle clarity, the kind of cold sunshine that makes every shadow sharper, and I woke in the guest room to the sound of Mark downstairs, trying to make pancakes the way Alex liked them, chocolate chips arranged in smiley faces, his efforts audible in the clatter of bowls and the faint hiss of batter hitting the pan, a domestic performance that felt both tender and desperate, as though he hoped the smell of breakfast could stitch us back together before the day fully began. I stayed in bed longer than usual, scrolling through my phone without really seeing anything, the screen a blur of notifications I ignored, until one from my sister Lauren caught my eye. "You've been quiet. Everything okay? Call me when you can." I stared at the message, thumb hovering, then typed back a quick, rough week. Might need to get away for the weekend. Can I crash at your place? Her reply came in seconds. Doors open. Bring wine, or just yourself. I'll clear the couch. Relief washed through me, small but real, Lauren lived an hour north in a tidy condo overlooking the river. No kids, no husband, just her graphic design work and a cat named Juniper who judged everyone equally. And the thought of 24 hours without the weight of our house, of Mark's careful footsteps, Alex's watchful glances, felt like permission to breathe. I dressed quietly, packed an overnight bag with the essentials and a book I hadn't touched in months, then went downstairs where the kitchen smelled of burnt edges and syrup. Alex was already at the table, fork halfway to his mouth, when he saw the duffel in my hand, his face closed like a door. Mark turned from the stove, spatula frozen mid-flip. "You're leaving?" Alex asked, voice flat but eyes wide. "Just for the weekend," I said, setting the bag by the door. "I need some time to think. Aunt Lauren's place. I'll be back Sunday night." Mark set the spatula down carefully, as though any sudden movement might shatter something. "I can stay at a hotel if you'd rather have the house," he offered, too quick, too eager to accommodate. I shook my head. "No, stay here with Alex. Keep things normal for him. Soccer game tomorrow, homework, whatever's on the calendar. I can't be here right now." Alex pushed his plate away, untouched pancake congealing. "This is because of Dad, right? Whatever he did." It wasn't a question. I knelt beside his chair, level with his gaze. "Yeah, it is, but it's between us. You're not in the middle, okay? You're the reason I'm coming back." He looked away, jaw tight, then muttered, "You better." Mark started to speak, stopped when I shot him a look, then simply nodded at Alex. "We'll be fine, bud. Text her whenever you want." I hugged Alex hard, his arms stiff at first, then softening just enough, and whispered, "Love you more than pancakes," our old joke that usually made him roll his eyes, but today earned a small, reluctant huff. Then I stood, met Mark's eyes for a long second. He looked hollowed out, like he hadn't slept properly since Tuesday, and part of me wanted to reach out. To ease the pain, I could see carving lines around his mouth, but the larger part still felt too raw, too betrayed to offer comfort. "I'll call Alex tonight," I said to both of them, then picked up my bag and left before the tears waiting behind my eyes could fall in front of them. The drive north was quiet, except for the low murmur of a podcast I barely heard, the highway stretching past strip malls and turning leaves, and by the time I pulled into Lauren's complex, the sky had clouded over again, promising more rain. She met me at the door with a glass of red already poured. No questions yet, just a quick hug that smelled of bergamot shampoo and printer ink. We settled on her balcony despite the chill, wrapped in throws, watching the river move slow and gray below us. After the first glass, she asked, gentle, "Want to tell me?" I did, everything, starting with the email and ending with Alex's quiet, "You better," that morning. And when I finished, she didn't rush to fix it, just sat with the silence until she said, "He sabotaged you because he was afraid of losing the version of life where he felt needed. That's not an excuse, but it's probably the truth." I nodded, staring into my wine. "I know, but knowing doesn't make it hurt less. I keep thinking about all the times I held back, didn't apply for that fellowship in Chicago, turned down the conference in LA, because I didn't want to disrupt us, and he was quietly making sure I never got the chance anyway." Lauren refilled my glass. "So what now? You going to try to rebuild, or are you done?" The question hung there heavy. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I love him, or I loved who I thought he was. But trust, that's gone. And Alex is watching every move we make. I can't just walk away without trying, but I can't pretend this didn't happen either." She reached over, squeezed my wrist, then set the rules. Make him earn it back, inch by inch. Transparency, therapy, whatever it takes. And if he balks, you'll know. We talked late into the night, about her latest client disaster, about how Juniper had knocked over a plant again. Small, grounding things that reminded me life existed outside our fractured marriage. Saturday, I slept until noon, woke to sunlight slanting across the guest bed, and spent the day wandering the river path with Lauren, phone on silent, except for Alex's texts. A photo of him and Mark at the soccer field, thumbs up emoji. Another of a pizza box with "We saved you a slice" written in Sharpie on the lid. Each one eased the knot in my chest a fraction, proof they were surviving without me there to referee. Sunday morning, I texted Mark, "Coming home tonight. We need to talk about boundaries before I walk back in. No more private conversations about my career with anyone. Full access to each other's phones and email if we're going to try this. And individual therapy starts this week, for both of us." His reply came almost immediately. "Yes to all of it. Thank you for coming home." I stared at the words, feeling the first faint stir of something not quite hope, but possibility, like a door cracked open after being slammed shut. When I pulled into our driveway that evening, the porch light was on. Alex's bike chained neatly by the steps, and through the window I could see them at the table eating leftovers. Mark laughing at something Alex said. Real laughter, not forced. And for a moment I stood outside in the cooling air, bag at my feet, watching the ordinary scene I'd almost lost. Knowing the road back would be long and uneven, but deciding finally to take the first real step across the threshold. Not because everything was fixed, but because walking away without knowing if it could be mended felt like another kind of surrender I wasn't ready to make. Monday morning felt like stepping onto new ice after a thaw. Thin, uncertain, every crack audible, even if no one spoke of it. And I woke before the alarm to the sound of Mark already in the shower, the water running longer than usual, as though he were trying to wash away more than sleep. While I lay staring at the ceiling of our bedroom, where I'd finally returned the night before, not because forgiveness had arrived, but because the guest room had started to feel like exile, and Alex needed to see us under the same roof again, even if the space between us on the mattress was wide enough for regret to lie down comfortably. I dressed for work in silence, choosing the navy blazer I'd worn to my last performance review, a small act of reclaiming territory. And when I came downstairs, Mark had already packed Alex's lunch, turkey sandwich on whole wheat, apple slices, the note he always tucked in that said, "Crush it today, champ," and set my travel mug beside the coffee maker with exactly the right amount of oat milk swirled in, no words attached, just the quiet offering of routine. Alex shuffled in, still in pajamas, rubbing his eyes, and paused when he saw me at the counter. Relief flickered across his face before he masked it with a yawn. "You're here," he said, almost to himself. "Yeah," I answered, ruffling his hair. "Here." Mark emerged from the hallway, towel drying the back of his neck, and our eyes met over Alex's head. Brief, careful, no expectation of warmth yet, but no hostility either. "I have my first session today," he said quietly, while Alex poured cereal. "Individual, 4 o'clock. The therapist emailed a link for virtual if that's easier." I nodded. "Good." I booked mine for tomorrow morning. Same woman, Dr. Ellis. Figured continuity might help. He exhaled, a small sound of gratitude, and for the first time since the email, I felt the tiniest loosening in my chest. Not trust returning, but the acknowledgement that we were both moving, however haltingly, in the direction of repair. The day passed in fragments. Emails at work I answered on autopilot. A lunch meeting where I smiled and nodded while my mind replayed Mark's promise of full transparency. The moment after lunch when I opened my phone settings, and fingers trembling slightly, shared my location with him again. Not because I wanted him tracking me, but because I wanted him to know I was choosing visibility over secrecy, a small, deliberate counter to the hidden conversations he'd had. He texted back almost immediately. "Thank you. I just shared mine too. And passwords if you want them." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat in my car in the office parking garage during a break, staring at the dashboard, and finally typed, "I'll look later. Not ready to dig through everything yet, but I appreciate it." His response was simple, 3 dots, then understood. After school, Alex had robotics club until 5, so the house was quiet when I got home. I used the time to change the sheets, fresh ones that smelled of detergent instead of stale hurt, and to move his pillow back to our bed. Not an invitation exactly, but a signal that the physical separation was easing, even if the emotional one still yawned wide. When Mark walked in at 6:30 carrying takeout bags from the Thai place we used to order from on Fridays, Alex lit up at the smell of patsiu, and for 20 minutes we ate at the table like a normal family, talking about his robot prototype that kept tipping over, about the rain forecast for tomorrow, about nothing that touched the bruise between us. And I noticed how Mark kept his movements small, careful not to crowd my space, how he asked Alex questions and listened without interrupting, how he glanced at me only when necessary, waiting for cues I wasn't yet ready to give. After dinner, Alex disappeared upstairs to finish homework, and Mark cleared the table while I loaded the dishwasher. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either, more like the pause between breaths. He spoke first, low enough that Alex wouldn't hear. "I told Dr. Ellis everything today. No minimizing. She said the sabotage came from a place of deep insecurity. Mine, not yours. And that owning it fully is the only way forward. She also said I should expect this to take time, that you might need to grieve the version of me you thought you knew." I rinsed a plate, watching water swirl down the drain. "She's right. I am grieving. Not just the opportunities, but the belief that you'd always have my back. That's harder to replace." He nodded, drying his hands on a towel. "I know. And I'm not asking you to rush. But I want you to see I'm doing the work. Not for absolution, but because I love you and Alex and this life more than my pride." The words landed softly without demand, and I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a crack in the wall I'd built, letting in the faintest sliver of light. I dried my hands, turned to face him fully. "I need one more thing tonight," I said. "Show me the emails you sent. All of them. Not screenshots. Let me see your account. Right now." He didn't hesitate. He pulled his laptop from his bag, logged in, opened the send folder, and slid it across the island toward me. I sat, scrolled through months of mundane messages until I found the thread with my boss, then another to a conference organizer I'd never known about, each one careful, concerned sounding poison. Reading them again hurt freshly, but seeing him sit there quietly while I did it, hands folded, eyes down, felt different, less like exposure and more like accountability. When I closed the laptop, I didn't slam it. I just pushed it back. "Thank you," I said, and meant it, for not fighting me on this. He looked up, eyes glassy. "I don't want to hide anymore." We didn't touch, didn't hug, or even stand closer. But when Alex came down later for a glass of water and saw us both still in the kitchen, side by side at the island, he paused, then gave a small nod as though registering progress, before heading back upstairs. Later in bed, Mark stayed on his side, I on mine, the space between us still deliberate. But when I reached over in the dark, not for him, but to turn off my phone on the nightstand, my fingers brushed his arm, accidental, and neither of us pulled away immediately. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden rush of passion or tears, just a momentary contact that lingered a second longer than it needed to, a quiet acknowledgement that touch wasn't entirely forbidden anymore, that the body remembered kindness even when the mind was still wary. I fell asleep listening to his breathing slow into sleep first, steady and untroubled for the first time in days, and though my own thoughts still raced, replaying words, weighing trust, wondering if vulnerability could ever feel safe again, I felt the smallest seed of something take root. Not hope exactly, but willingness, the decision to keep showing up, one careful step at a time, until the ground beneath us felt solid enough to stand on together again. The first joint session with Dr. Ellis fell on a Thursday evening, 2 weeks after I'd returned from Lawrence. The kind of gray autumn afternoon that made the streetlights come on early and turned every window into a mirror reflecting our strained faces as we drove separately to her office downtown. Me in my car after dropping Alex at a friend's for a sleepover, Mark in his. Both of us arriving within minutes of each other and parking side by side without speaking, the silence between our vehicles heavier than the traffic noise fading behind us. Dr. Ellis's waiting room smelled faintly of eucalyptus from the diffuser on the side table, and we sat in the 2 armchairs farthest apart, scrolling phones we weren't really reading, until she opened the door and said, "Come on in," her voice calm but firm, the same tone she'd used years ago when we'd sat here arguing about whose turn it was to handle bedtime routines. Inside the room, the couch looked too small for the distance we still carried. I took one end, Mark the other, leaving the middle cushion empty, like an unspoken agreement not to pretend closeness we hadn't earned. Dr. Ellis settled into her chair, notepad on her lap, but pen still, and started with the simplest question. "What brings you here together today?" Mark spoke first, voice low and steady, despite the tremor I could see in his clasp hands. I betrayed her trust. I sent emails to her professional contacts, suggesting she wasn't stable enough for advancement, framed as concern, but really because I was afraid of what her success might mean for us, for me. I've owned it in individual sessions, but she needs to hear me say it here, without excuses. I stared at the carpet pattern, small gray diamonds on beige, while he talked, feeling the words land like stones in still water, ripples spreading but not yet breaking the surface. When he finished, I looked up at Dr. Ellis. He's right. It wasn't just the career hits. It was the realization that the person I told my deepest fears to used them against me. I don't know how to unknow that. She nodded, no rush to fill the quiet that followed, then asked me, "What would safety look like for you right now, in this room, with him?" The question caught me off guard. I'd expected probing about anger or plans, not this gentle invitation to name what I needed. I swallowed. I need to say the hard things without being managed or reassured too quickly, and I need him to listen without defending, even if it hurts him. Mark shifted slightly, uncrossed his legs, then crossed them again. "I can do that," he said, eyes on me now, steady. So I started, slow at first, then faster, the words spilling out like they'd been waiting behind a dam. How every time he'd encouraged me to apply for something bigger, I'd wondered retroactively if it was genuine or calculated to keep me close enough to control. How the nights I'd cried over rejections now felt tainted, like grief for opportunities stolen twice, once by his actions, once by my doubt in his love. How I missed the ease we used to have, the way we'd finish each other's sentences over dinner, but feared that version of us was gone forever. He listened, really listened, face pale, jaw tight, eyes glistening at points but never looking away, never interrupting with "but I didn't mean" or "I was scared." When I ran out of words, throat raw, Dr. Ellis turned to him. "What's coming up for you hearing that?" He took a long breath. Shame. Deep shame. And grief. For what I took from her, from us. I keep thinking about the night she got the news about the New York Fellowship being denied. She came home quiet, said it wasn't meant to be, and I held her while she cried, telling her she was enough just as she was. And the whole time I knew I'd helped make sure it didn't happen. I hate that I did that to her. His voice broke on the last sentence, and he pressed the heel of his hand to his eye, shoulders shaking once before he steadied himself. Dr. Ellis let the moment sit, then said softly, "You both carried secrets. He the actions, you the suspicion after. Bringing them into the light is painful, but it's also the beginning of something honest. Let's try something small. If you're willing, reach across the space between you, not to hold hands yet, but just to rest your hand where the other can see it, palm up. No pressure to touch, just an offer." I hesitated. The couch felt suddenly vast, but I moved my right hand to the middle cushion, palm open, fingers slightly curled. After a beat, Mark did the same, his hand inches from mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating, but not quite touching. We sat like that for what felt like minutes, two open hands, vulnerable, waiting, while Dr. Ellis spoke quietly about how trust rebuilds not in grand gestures but in these tiny, consistent risks, showing up, staying present, allowing the other to choose whether to bridge the gap. When the session ended, we didn't rush to fill the silence. We stood, thanked her, walked out together into the hallway where the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. In the elevator down, Mark said, almost under his breath, "Thank you for doing this with me." I didn't answer right away, but when the doors opened, I stepped out beside him instead of ahead, our shoulders brushing for the first time in weeks. Not intentional, just proximity, and neither of us pulled away. The drive home was separate again, but when I pulled into the garage, he was already there, waiting by the door with his keys out like he timed it to meet me. Inside the house felt different, still marked by everything that had happened, but less like a crime scene. Alex was still at his friend's, so the quiet was ours. Mark went to the kitchen, started water for tea without asking if I wanted any, and I followed, leaning against the counter while he dropped chamomile bags into mugs. When he handed me mine, our fingers touched. Deliberate this time, brief but real, and I didn't flinch. We stood there drinking in silence, steam curling between us, until he said, "I don't expect you to forget. I just hope one day you can believe I'm different because of this, not in spite of it." I looked at him then, really looked, the lines around his eyes deeper, the way he held himself smaller, more careful, and felt the first genuine flicker of something softer than anger. Not love renewed exactly, but recognition. This was still the man who'd learned to make my coffee exactly right, who'd sat through every one of Alex's school plays in the back row so he could clap loudest, who'd now chosen to face the wreckage he'd made instead of running. "I'm not there yet," I said honestly, "but I'm here. That's something." He nodded, eyes shining again, and when we went upstairs later, he waited until I was in bed before sliding in on his side, the space between us narrower tonight, not closed, but shrinking. In the dark, I reached out, not far, just enough, and let my pinky rest against his, the smallest point of contact, fragile as thread, but holding. Neither of us spoke. We just breathed, listening to the house settle around us, the furnace clicking on, rain tapping the window like hesitant fingers. And for the first time since the discovery, I fell asleep without replaying the emails in my head, without calculating losses, only aware of that single tentative point where skin met skin, a quiet promise that maybe, slowly, we could learn to reach again without fear of what we might find. The idea for the weekend away came from Dr. Ellis in our third joint session, suggested almost casually toward the end when the air in the room had started to feel less like a courtroom and more like a place where two people could sit without armor for longer stretches. She asked if we'd considered a short trip somewhere neutral, not a romantic getaway, but a deliberate change of scenery to practice being together outside the familiar geography of hurt, somewhere the kitchen island and the guest room door couldn't remind us of every argument or avoidance. So Mark proposed the cabin his parents used to rent upstate, a small place on a quiet lake about 3 hours north, empty this time of year, except for the occasional hiker. And after a long silence, during which I weighed the risk of being trapped with him against the possibility of seeing something new in the quiet, I said yes, not enthusiastically, but decisively, telling Alex we were taking a family reset weekend, while he stayed with Lauren, who promised video games and late-night movies, and no questions unless he wanted to ask them. We left Friday after work, the car packed with groceries and board games we hadn't touched in years. The drive mostly silent at first, except for the low hum of a playlist Mark had made. Old songs we used to sing along to on road trips when Alex was small, now playing without comment, the lyrics landing differently, heavier with memory. Halfway there, rain started again, soft at first, then steady, windshield wipers keeping time while I stared out at the blurring trees and felt the old reflex to reach for his hand on the gear shift, stopping myself just short, until at a red light he glanced over and said quietly, "You can if you want." And after another beat, I did, my fingers resting lightly over his knuckles, not gripping, just there, warm against cold skin. And neither of us spoke about it, but the contact stayed until the light changed and we needed both hands again. The cabin smelled of pine and last season's wood smoke when we walked in. We unpacked in companionable quiet, Mark starting a fire in the stone hearth while I put away the food. Pasta, bread, eggs, the makings of simple meals that didn't require much conversation. And when the flames caught, he stood back, hands in pockets, watching them grow, then turned to me and asked, "Want to walk down to the lake before it gets too dark?" I nodded, pulled on my coat, and we stepped out into the damp evening, the path slick with fallen leaves, flashlights unnecessary because the moon broke through clouds just enough to silver the water ahead. We walked single file at first, then side by side when the trail widened, our shoulders brushing occasionally, accidental, then not. At the dock, we stopped, sat on the edge with legs dangling over dark water, the cold seeping through jeans, and for a long time said nothing, just listened to the lap of waves and the distant call of something nocturnal. Then Mark spoke, voice low against the night. I keep thinking about the night Alex was born, how scared I was, not just of being a dad, but of not being enough for you two. I carried that fear so long it turned into something ugly. I thought if you got bigger, career, recognition, I'd disappear in the shadow, so I tried to keep you smaller without even admitting it to myself. I stared at the water, ripples catching moonlight. I felt it too sometimes, like if I pushed too hard you'd resent me for changing the balance, but I never acted on it. You did. He nodded, slow. I know, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life. But sitting here, I realize I don't want the version of us where I'm safe because you're held back. I want the version where we both get to grow, even if it terrifies me. The admission hung there, raw, and I felt tears come. Not angry ones, but the kind that arrive when something knotted finally loosens. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I missed you, I said, surprised by the truth of it. Not just the good parts, the whole messy thing. But I'm still scared. He turned toward me then, careful. Me too, but I'd rather be scared together than safe apart. We sat longer, cold creeping in, until I shivered and he stood, offered his hand. I took it, let him pull me up, and when our fingers stayed laced walking back up the path, the contact felt less tentative, more like memory relearning itself. Inside, we shed wet coats, made pasta with jar sauce and garlic bread, ate on the couch in front of the fire instead of the table, knees touching under the blanket we dragged over us. After dishes, we played Scrabble, old rules, no mercy, and laughed when he tried to pass key as a word we both knew was real, but argued anyway, the sound startling in the quiet cabin. Real laughter that didn't feel forced. Later, when the fire died to embers and the room cooled, we went upstairs to the loft bedroom with its slanted ceiling and one quilt too thin for November. I changed in the bathroom, came out to find him already under the covers, leaving space but not the chasm of before. I slid in, turned on my side to face him. In the dim glow from the window, his eyes searched mine. Can I hold you? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. I considered, heart thudding, then nodded once. He moved closer slowly, arms sliding around my waist, pulling me against his chest until I could hear his heartbeat, fast, unsteady, matching mine, and I rested my forehead against his collarbone, breathing in the familiar scent of his skin mixed with wood smoke, feeling the tension in both our bodies gradually unwind, not into passion but into something simpler, more necessary, the comfort of being held by the person who'd hurt you most, and was now trying hardest not to. We didn't speak again that night. Sleep came in pieces, waking to adjust positions, his hand finding mine under the quilt, my leg hooking over his calf without thinking. Small reconnections that built through the dark hours until morning light filtered through the pines, and we woke tangled, still clothed, still scarred, but closer than we'd been in months. Saturday stretched slow, hiking the short trail behind the cabin, stopping to watch a deer cross the path, sharing a thermos of coffee on a fallen log, talking about Alex's latest robotics obsession, about work deadlines neither of us dreaded as much now, about nothing and everything except the betrayal itself, giving it a rest for once. That night we made s'mores over the fire pit outside to stake the chill, sticky marshmallows and graham cracker crumbs, laughing when one caught fire and he blew it out too late, stood on his nose, and when I reached up to wipe it off he caught my wrist gently, kissed the inside of it, soft, questioning, and I didn't pull away, let the moment linger, let myself feel the warmth without bracing for pain. Sunday we drove home in companionable quiet, hands linked over the console most of the way, and when we pulled into the driveway, Alex was waiting on the porch with Lauren, waving wildly, running to hug us both at once. He looked between our faces, searching, then grinned. You guys look better. We laughed, ruffled his hair, carried bags inside while he chattered about the weekend. And later, after Lauren left and Alex was in bed, Mark and I stood in the kitchen, dishes done, lights low. He turned to me. Thank you for going, for giving us that. I stepped closer, rested my head on his shoulder. Thank you for not giving up. No promises were spoken, no vows of perfection, no declarations that everything was fixed. But when we climbed the stairs together, when we slid into bed and the space between us had vanished entirely, when his arms came around me and mine around him without hesitation, I felt the slow, hard-earned shift, not back to who we were, but forward to who we might become. Scarred, yes, and no longer bleeding, holding each other with the careful strength of people who had walked through fire and chosen against every instinct to run, to stay, and rebuild. A year to the day since the email that changed everything arrived in my inbox like an ordinary notification among dozens of others, I woke to sunlight slanting through the bedroom blinds and thin gold bars across the quilt. The same quilt we'd bought on clearance 5 years earlier because it was soft and didn't show dog hair, even though we didn't have a dog. And for a moment, I simply lay there, listening to the house breathe. Mark's steady exhales beside me, the faint clink of Alex downstairs trying to make coffee without waking us, the distant rumble of a garbage truck making its weekly round through the neighborhood, and felt something settle deep in my chest. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of something quieter, more durable. The knowledge that we had survived the worst of it, and were still here, side by side, choosing each morning to try again. I turned my head. Mark was already awake, eyes open, watching me with the careful attentiveness he'd learned over these months. No longer the desperate plea of those first weeks, but a steady gaze that said he was present, fully, without demanding anything in return. Morning, he murmured, voice rough with sleep. Morning, I answered, and reached out to trace the line of his jaw with one finger, a small gesture that had become routine again, not charged with the weight of reconciliation every time, just ordinary affection reclaimed inch by inch. Downstairs, Alex had managed to brew coffee without spilling, though the counter bore evidence of his effort in scattered grounds and a half-empty milk carton. He poured 3 mugs, added oat milk to mine without asking, then slid one toward Mark when he appeared in the doorway wearing the faded gray hoodie Alex had once claimed as his own. Happy anniversary of not breaking up, Alex said, deadpan, but with a small grin tugging at his mouth, the kind of dark humor he developed as a shield during the hardest months. We both laughed, real, surprised laughter, and Mark ruffled his hair. Thanks for the reminder, kid. We'll take it. The day unfolded in the unremarkable rhythm we'd rebuilt. Breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast eaten standing at the island because the table was covered in Alex's robotics project pieces. A quick walk around the block with the 3 of us, coats zipped against the late February chill, talking about nothing important. His upcoming science fair, Mark's new work deadline, my latest manuscript submission that had actually gotten a positive response from an editor instead of silence. And when we passed the park bench where I'd once sat alone crying after dropping Alex at school last spring, neither of us commented on it, but our hands found each other midway through the loop, fingers lacing naturally. No fanfare, just the quiet fact of connection that had once seemed impossible. Back home, I retreated to the small office nook we'd carved out of the dining room corner, opened my laptop to the folder labeled Career 2.0, and stared at the acceptance email that had come 3 months earlier. Not the senior editor role I'd lost, but a hybrid position at a smaller press that allowed remote work most days, meaningful projects, and enough travel to feel challenged without upending our life here. I'd accepted it quietly, without fanfare, because the victory felt different now, earned not just through my work, but through the slow reclamation of trust, in myself, in us. Mark knocked softly on the doorframe later, holding 2 fresh coffees. "How's it going in here?" he asked, setting one beside me. I leaned back in the chair. "Good, really good. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it hasn't." He sat on the edge of the desk. "I still wake up sometimes thinking you'll be gone. Then I remember you're here, and I get to keep earning that." I studied his face, the familiar lines, the faint scar above his eyebrow from a childhood bike accident he told me about on our second date, and felt the old ache rise, not as sharp grief now, but as a tender acknowledgement of everything we'd lost and found again. "We're not the same people we were before," I said. "No," he agreed. "We're better at being honest, and we're still us." Alex poked his head in then, holding up his phone. "Group chat says pizza night at ours tonight, can we?" Mark looked at me. I nodded. "Tell them yes, but you're on cleanup duty." He ground theatrically but grinned, disappearing to text back. Evening arrived with the doorbell ringing every few minutes. Friends, neighbors, the easy circle we'd maintained through everything without letting them too close to the raw edges. And the house filled with voices, laughter, the smell of pepperoni and garlic knots, kids running upstairs while adults clustered in the kitchen trading stories about work and school and the relentless march of time. At one point, I caught Mark across the room, leaning against the counter talking to Sarah, the colleague who had forwarded the email chain that started it all, and felt a brief flare of the old hurt. But then I saw the way he listened, nodded, kept his posture open without defensiveness, and when he glanced over and met my eyes, he gave a small, private smile that said, "I see you. I'm here. I'm not hiding." Later, after everyone left and the last paper plate was stacked in the trash, after Alex had gone to bed with promises to finish his project tomorrow, Mark and I stood in the quiet kitchen loading the dishwasher side by side, elbows brushing, the domestic choreography so familiar it almost felt like before, except it wasn't, because now every shared task carried the weight of choice, of having almost lost this and decided to fight for it. When the machine hummed to life, he turned off the light over the sink, leaving only the soft glow from the living room lamp, and pulled me gently against him, arms around my waist, chin resting on my shoulder. "I love you," he said simply, no prelude, no plea. I turned in his hold, rested my forehead against his. "I love you too, and I trust you, not perfectly, not every second, but enough to keep building with you." He exhaled, a sound of quiet relief that echoed through both of us, and we stood there swaying slightly, not dancing exactly, but moving together in the dim light, letting the moment stretch until it felt like enough. Upstairs, we slid into bed, the space between us long gone. His hand found mine under the covers, fingers threading through mine, and as sleep pulled at the edges, I thought about the year behind us, the nights apart, the therapy sessions where we learned to name shame without letting it define us, the small victories of transparency, the weekend at the cabin where touch became possible again, the slow return of laughter, and felt a deep, steady certainty. We weren't perfect. The scars remained visible in quiet moments when doubt flickered and our old insecurities whispered, but the bond we carried now was stronger for having been broken and mended, threaded with honesty and hard-won grace. Outside the window, February rain began again, soft against the glass, and I closed my eyes listening to Mark's breathing slow into sleep beside me, our hands still linked, the house settling around us like a promise kept. Not fairy tale, not flawless, but real, resilient, and ours.